The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was built from black crystal that had been mined from the heart of a dead star. It rose higher than any building on Earth, its walls curved like the inside of an egg, and its ceiling glowed with soft blue light that never dimmed. Thousands of years of history had passed through this room. Empires had risen here. Empires had fallen here. And tonight, for the first time, a new species stood before the council to speak. That species was humanity. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform reserved for the representative of each member world. Around it, in tall curved seats that rose like waves frozen in stone, sat the delegates of over 300 species. Some were tall and thin with skin like polished metal. Some had 4 arms and eyes that could see in every direction. Some were massive creatures who needed special chairs built from reinforced alloy just to hold their weight. All of them were ancient. All of them were powerful. And all of them were staring down at the small, fragile figure standing alone on the platform. Her name was Ambassador Elena Voss. She was 51 years old, dressed in a simple gray uniform with the small blue emblem of Earth stitched over her heart. She was not tall. She was not physically strong compared to the beings around her. She carried no weapon. She had no bodyguards. She stood completely alone, and yet she did not look afraid. A soft chime rang through the chamber, signaling that the session had begun. From the highest seat reserved for the council speaker, a tall alien with silver skin and sharp golden eyes rose to address the room. His name was Speaker Dramos, an ancient being from a species that had sat at the head of this council for over 4,000 years. His voice when he spoke was calm, cold, and carried easily across the massive chamber. "Humanity," he said, letting the word hang in the air like a joke waiting for its punchline. "The newest member of this council. Barely 2 years have passed since your species first made contact with us, and already you stand here today asking for protection." A ripple of low laughter spread through the chamber. Not loud, not rude. Just enough to make it clear what the council truly thought of Earth. Elena did not flinch. She kept her hands folded in front of her and waited for the laughter to fade. "I am not asking for protection," she said clearly. "I am asking for peace. 3 fleets belonging to the Vaskar Empire are currently stationed at the edge of our solar system. They have made demands. They want access to Earth's resources, our oceans, our minerals, and control over our shipping lanes. We are asking this council to intervene, as is our right as a member world." At this, a new figure stood from the seats. He was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, with dark red skin covered in ridges like armor plating. 2 curved horns rose from his skull, and his eyes glowed with an orange light that seemed to burn from somewhere deep inside him. This was Warlord Kroom, Supreme Commander of the Vaskar war fleets and one of the most feared military leaders in the galaxy. "Access?" Kroom said, his voice a deep growl that vibrated through the floor. "I do not ask for access. I take what I want. Earth has resources it does not even understand how to use. Your species barely left your own planet a century ago. You have no war fleet. You have no shields. You have no weapons capable of even scratching one of my ships. What exactly do you believe this council can do to stop me?" More laughter, louder this time. Several delegates leaned toward each other, whispering, smiling, clearly enjoying the moment. To them, this was not a serious conflict. This was a wealthy predator circling a helpless animal, and the animal was foolish enough to ask the other predators in the room for help. Speaker Dramos raised a hand, and the chamber slowly quieted. "Ambassador Voss," he said, his tone almost gentle, almost pitying, "you must understand the position you are in. This council does not send its fleets to defend every weak world that a stronger empire chooses to claim. If we did that, we would be at war constantly. The galaxy operates on strength. It always has. Species that cannot defend themselves are, unfortunately, at the mercy of those who can. So the council's answer," Elena said slowly, "is that might makes right." "The council's answer," Dramos corrected, "is that reality makes right. We did not create the rules of survival. We simply follow them, as every species before you has had to do." Warlord Kroom let out a low, rumbling laugh. "Humanity should be grateful," he said. "I am not here to destroy your species. I am here to take what I need, and then I will leave the rest of you alone to live your small, quiet lives. Resist, and I will burn your cities until you understand your place." The chamber fell into a strange, heavy silence, waiting to see how the tiny human woman would respond to such an open threat. Elena looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of delegate after delegate. Some looked away. Some looked amused. None of them looked like they intended to help. "You misunderstand something," she said finally, her voice steady and calm. "You believe Earth has asked for protection because we are afraid. We are not afraid. We came here today because it is proper, because it is diplomatic, and because Earth values peace above conflict. But do not mistake our request for peace as a request for mercy. We do not need your mercy." Kroom's glowing eyes narrowed. Bold words from a species with no fleet. "You keep mentioning our fleet," Elena said. "Or the fact that we don't have one. Tell me, Warlord, how many ships do you currently have stationed near Earth?" Kroom smiled, showing rows of sharp black teeth. 3 full war fleets, 240 warships. Enough firepower to turn your entire planet into dust within a single hour, should I choose to give the order. 240 warships, Elena repeated softly, almost to herself. Then she looked up, directly at Kroom, directly at Dramos, directly at the entire Watching Council. "By the time the sun rises over my home city tomorrow morning, every single one of those ships will be gone." For a moment, there was total silence. Then the chamber erupted into laughter. Real laughter this time. Loud and mocking, spreading from seat to seat like wildfire. Delegates who had barely paid attention before now leaned forward, grinning, some even clapping their hands together in amusement. It was, to them, the most ridiculous thing they had heard in years. A species with no warships, no advanced weapons, and barely any presence beyond its own solar system, claiming it would destroy an entire empire's war fleet in a single night. Warlord Kroom laughed the loudest of all, his massive frame shaking with amusement. "You," he said once he could speak again, "your pitiful species with your primitive ships and your children's toys you call weapons, will destroy 240 Vaskar warships. By tomorrow morning?" "Yes," Elena said simply. "How?" Kroom demanded, still grinning. "With harsh language? Will you throw rocks at my ships from your planet's surface?" More laughter. Even Speaker Dramos allowed himself a small, thin smile, something rare for the ancient alien. "Ambassador Voss," Dramos said, "I admire confidence. Truly I do. But confidence without capability is simply foolishness. This council has watched countless young species make bold declarations before facing reality. I would advise you, for the safety of your world, to reconsider such statements." Elena did not smile. She did not laugh. She simply looked at the speaker with calm, steady eyes. "I understand why you don't believe me," she said. "You have watched humanity for 2 years. You have seen our cities, our simple ships, our early technology. You believe you understand exactly what we are capable of. But I would remind this council of something important. Every species that has ever underestimated another has eventually regretted it. Is that a threat, Ambassador?" Dramos asked, his golden eyes narrowing slightly. "No," Elena said. "It's a fact of history. Ask your own historians. Ask how many great empires fell not to stronger enemies, but to enemies they never took seriously until it was too late." The chamber grew quiet again, though this time the silence felt different. Less amused, slightly uncertain, though most of the delegates still wore expressions of disbelief or mild irritation. From near the back of the chamber, in one of the older, less prominent seats, an elderly alien with pale blue skin and deep wrinkles across her face watched the exchange with far more attention than most. Her name was Elder Scythia, one of the oldest surviving members of the council, a being who had witnessed the rise and fall of at least 6 empires during her impossibly long life. Unlike the others, she was not laughing. Unlike the others, a small, uneasy feeling had begun to form in the back of her ancient mind. She remembered something. Something old. Something that most in this chamber were too young to know about. Years ago, decades in fact, long before humanity had even developed space travel, a small scouting fleet belonging to a minor exploratory species had entered Earth's solar system without permission, curious about the strange blue planet that seemed to be developing intelligent life. That fleet, 5 small scout ships, had sent one final transmission before losing contact forever. The scouts had reported strange anomalies near the planet, energy readings that made no sense, and then nothing. No wreckage was ever found. No debris, no distress signal. The ships had simply vanished, as if the space around Earth itself had reached out and erased them. At the time, most in the council had dismissed it as an accident, a navigation error, perhaps a collision with unknown debris. The story faded into obscurity, filed away as an unsolved mystery, one of thousands the galaxy produced every year. But now, listening to this small human woman speak with such calm, unshaken confidence in a room full of beings powerful enough to destroy her entire planet with a single command, Elder Scythia found herself remembering that old forgotten report. And for the first time in a very long while, she felt something she had not felt in centuries. Doubt. She leaned toward the delegate seated beside her, a younger alien from a neighboring system. "Do you know," she whispered, "what happened to the Velkar scouting fleet many years ago near that very planet?" The younger delegate frowned, clearly not familiar with the story. "No, should I?" Elder Scythia said nothing more. She simply turned her gaze back toward Elena Voss, studying the human woman's calm face, searching for any sign of fear, any crack in her confidence. She found none. Meanwhile, at the front of the chamber, Warlord Kroom had grown tired of the exchange. He stood tall, towering over the platform where Elena remained standing, and pointed one massive clawed finger directly at her. "Enough talk," he said. "You have made your foolish declaration, human. Now let reality answer it. My fleets remain in position near your solar system. If Earth does not agree to my demands within the next 24 hours, I will begin bombardment of your smaller cities as a demonstration of what is to come. Perhaps then your species will understand its place in this galaxy." "You already gave your demonstration," Elena said quietly. "The moment you brought 240 warships to a planet that has never harmed you, never threatened you, and never given you any reason for war. That was your demonstration, Warlord, and Earth has heard it clearly." Kroom's glowing eyes flared with anger. "Careful, human. Do not mistake patience for weakness." "I could say the exact same thing to you," Elena replied. Speaker Dramos raised his hand once more, signaling the end of the session, before tempers could escalate further. "This council formally acknowledges Earth's request," he said, his tone flat and official. However, without clear evidence of unprovoked aggression beyond a military presence, which the Vaskar Empire is legally permitted to maintain in neutral space, this council cannot authorize intervention at this time. Ambassador Voss, I would strongly encourage your government to negotiate directly with Warlord Kroom before this situation escalates beyond your ability to survive it. The chamber began to empty, delegates rising from their seats, many still smiling, many already forgetting about the strange little human woman and her impossible claim. To them, this was already over. A minor, forgettable moment in council history, a weak species, given one final chance to save itself through negotiation before being quietly erased or absorbed like so many others before it. Elena remained on the platform a moment longer, watching them leave. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing softly against the black crystal floor. Outside, in the corridor leading toward the human transport ship, a young council aide fell into step beside her, clearly curious. "Ambassador," the aide said carefully, "may I ask, were you serious about tomorrow morning?" Elena stopped walking. She turned to look at the aide, and for the first time since entering the chamber, something shifted in her expression. Not fear, not anger, but something closer to quiet certainty. "Humanity does not make promises it cannot keep," she said. "Warlord Kroom brought 240 warships to threaten a planet he does not understand. He assumes we are weak because we have no visible fleet, no massive weapons, nothing that fits his idea of strength. But strength takes many forms, and by dawn tomorrow, the galaxy will understand exactly what humanity's strength truly looks like." She walked away, leaving the young aide standing alone in the corridor, uncertain, uneasy, and strangely unable to shake the feeling that something enormous was about to happen. Far above Earth, in the cold silence of space, the three Vaskar war fleets sat in perfect formation near the edge of the solar system. Their crews confident, their commanders relaxed, believing they faced no real threat at all. They had no idea that Earth had already been watching them, studying them, preparing for them. The countdown had already begun. By dawn, everything would change. Elder Scythia did not go home after the council session ended, while the other delegates returned to their private quarters, laughing among themselves about the strange little human woman and her impossible promise. Scythia made her way instead to the lowest level of the council building, the archive, A massive underground chamber where every record, every report, and every forgotten piece of history from the last 10,000 years was stored. She was old. Older than almost anyone else on the council. Her pale blue skin had grown thin and papery with age, and her movements were slow, careful, deliberate. But her mind remained sharp, and right now that mind would not let go of a memory that had been buried for decades. The archive was mostly empty at this hour. A few young council clerks moved quietly between the shelves, sorting data crystals and updating records. None of them paid much attention to the elderly delegate as she made her way toward the oldest section of the archive, where records were kept not on modern data crystals but on old-fashioned storage cores, the kind that hadn't been used in over 60 years. "I need the Velkar expedition records," Cynthia said to the young clerk stationed near the entrance. "The scouting mission. Sector 7. Approximately 63 years ago." The clerk blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the reference. I'm not sure that's something we keep active records on." "Elder, that sounds like it would be in deep storage." "Then take me to deep storage," Cynthia said simply. The clerk hesitated only a moment before nodding and leading her deeper into the archive, past shelf after shelf of glowing data crystals, until they reached a small dusty section near the back wall. Here the records were older, less organized, stored on physical cores instead of the crystal network most delegates use today. It took nearly 20 minutes of searching before the clerk finally found what Cynthia was looking for. A single, faded storage core labeled simply Velkar Scout Fleet, Sector 7, Incident Report. Classified. Unresolved. Cynthia took the core carefully in her thin hands and made her way to a private reading terminal in the corner of the archive. She inserted the core, and the terminal flickered to life, projecting old text and images into the air before her. The report was exactly as she remembered it, though the details had grown fuzzy over the decades. 63 years ago, a small exploratory fleet belonging to the Velkar species, a minor, peaceful race known mostly for cataloging new star systems, had entered an unremarkable solar system on the edge of known space. Their mission was simple: survey the system, note any planets capable of supporting life, and return with data for future colonization possibilities. 5 small scout ships had entered the system. Their scans detected a single blue planet, third from its star, showing early signs of complex life: plants, oceans, and what appeared to be simple animal life forms. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have caused any concern. The fleet's final transmission recorded in the report read, "Approaching third planet for closer scan. Detecting unusual energy readings from planetary surface unlike anything in our database. Readings do not match any known natural phenomenon. Continuing approach for further study." That was the last transmission ever received from the Velkar Scout Fleet. No wreckage was ever found. No debris field, no distress signal, no survivors. The 5 ships, along with their crews, had simply vanished, as though they had never existed at all. A follow-up investigation, conducted nearly a year later by a larger Velkar recovery fleet, found nothing. The planet appeared completely undisturbed. No sign of technology, no sign of advanced civilization. Just a quiet, unremarkable world with simple plant and animal life. Exactly as the original scouts had reported before their disappearance. The case was eventually closed, filed as an unsolved mystery, likely the result of some unknown natural hazard, perhaps a rare space anomaly, an unstable gravitational field, or some kind of unknown radiation. The Velkar species, already a minor and cautious people, marked the system as off-limits and never returned. Cynthia stared at the old report for a long time, her ancient eyes scanning the same lines over and over. The name of that unremarkable blue planet, third from its star, was listed clearly in the report's final line. Designation, Sol 3. Local name, translated, Earth. Cynthia sat back slowly in her chair, her mind racing despite her old age. 63 years ago, before humanity had even developed space travel, before they had any concept that other intelligent life existed in the galaxy, something near their planet had erased an entire scouting fleet without leaving a single trace. At the time, no one connected the mystery to Earth specifically, because Earth had been nothing more than an unremarkable, pre-spaceflight world on a report nobody cared about. But now, watching this human ambassador stand fearlessly before the council and calmly promise the destruction of an entire war fleet by morning, Scythia could not shake the feeling that the two events were connected somehow. She needed to know more. Far above Earth, near the edge of the solar system, the three Vaskar war fleets remained in position, exactly where Warlord Kroom had ordered them to wait. Inside the command ship of the First Fleet, a Vaskar officer named Commander Threx stood at the main viewing window, staring out at the small blue planet in the distance. Threx was young for a Vaskar commander, barely past his first century of life, eager to prove himself worthy of his position under the great Warlord Kroom. "Status report," Threx said to the officer seated at the sensor array. "All systems normal, Commander," the officer replied. "No unusual activity detected from the planet's surface. Their technology remains primitive. Basic satellites, simple radio communications, nothing capable of threatening our fleet." Threx nodded, satisfied. Everything appeared exactly as expected. Earth was weak, undefended, and completely unprepared for what was coming. And yet something about the human ambassador's words during the council session bothered him. He had watched the recording of the session twice already, studying her calm, unshaken expression as she made her impossible promise. "By the time the sun rises over my home city tomorrow morning, every single one of those ships will be gone." It was, of course, an empty threat, a desperate, foolish bluff from a species with no real power. And yet something about the way she said it, without fear, without hesitation, without even the slightest crack in her confidence, made Threx uneasy in a way he couldn't quite explain. He pushed the feeling aside. Warlord Kroom had commanded countless successful campaigns across a dozen star systems. The Vaskar Empire had never lost a war fleet to any species without first destroying that species' entire military capability. Earth, with its scattered nations, its basic ships, and its complete lack of any unified defense force, posed no real threat at all. "Continue monitoring the planet," Threx ordered. "Report any unusual activity immediately." "Yes, Commander," the officer replied. Threx turned back to the viewing window, watching Earth slowly rotate in the distance, its surface covered in scattered lights from human cities. Somewhere down there on that small, fragile planet, a species that had barely left its own solar system truly believed it could destroy an empire that had conquered a dozen worlds. It would have been almost funny if it weren't so pathetically foolish. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a massive underground facility, hidden beneath the mountains of a location known only to a handful of the highest-ranking human officials, a very different kind of preparation was taking place. The facility, known internally as Foundation Command, had been built decades earlier, long before humanity's first official contact with alien life. Its existence remained one of the most closely guarded secrets on the entire planet, known to only a small circle of scientists, military leaders, and government officials from every major nation on Earth. Inside the facility's central command room, dozens of screens displayed real-time data feeds, sensor readings from deep space monitoring stations, tracking systems following the movement of the Vaskar fleets, and complex calculations running continuously across massive computer systems. At the center of the room stood General Marcus Chen, the human officer in charge of Foundation Command's defensive operations. Beside him stood Dr. Amara Ose, the facility's lead scientist, responsible for developing much of the advanced technology that had been quietly researched over the past several decades. "Fleet positions confirmed," Chen said, studying the data on the main screen. 3 Vaskar fleets, 240 warships total, holding position at the outer edge of the solar system, exactly where our projections predicted. "And their scanning capabilities?" Osi asked. "Advanced by our standards," Chen said, "but nowhere near sophisticated enough to detect what we've built. As far as their sensors are concerned, Earth remains a primitive, undefended world." Osi allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Good. That's exactly what we need them to believe. For decades, ever since the earliest signs of intelligent life beyond Earth had first been detected, a small group of human scientists and military leaders had worked in complete secrecy, preparing for a moment they hoped would never come, but knew eventually would. They had studied every scrap of information available about the wider galaxy, learned everything possible about the technology used by other species, and quietly developed defenses far beyond what the rest of the galaxy believed humanity capable of. Ambassador Elena Voss was not simply a diplomat. She was one of the very few people on Earth fully briefed on Foundation Command's true capabilities, chosen specifically for her calm, unshakable demeanor and her ability to face impossible pressure without revealing what truly lay hidden beneath humanity's peaceful, primitive appearance. She kept her promise to remain calm during the council session, Chen said, watching a replay of the meeting on one of the side screens. Even when the warlord threatened bombardment directly, good, that will make what comes next even more effective. They still believe we're helpless, Osei said, studying the fleet positions on the main display. That belief is our greatest advantage. Chen turned to face the room full of operators and technicians, all quietly working at their stations, preparing systems that had been developed and tested over years of careful, secret research. Initiate final preparation sequence, Chen said, his voice calm but firm. Every system online by 300 hours. We move the moment those fleets make their first aggressive action. Across the massive command room, dozens of operators began entering commands, activating systems that had remained dormant, waiting patiently for this exact moment. Far above, unaware of what was being prepared beneath the planet they intended to conquer, the Vaskar fleets continued their patient wait, confident in their overwhelming strength, confident in their inevitable victory. They had no idea that the same planet that had once erased an entire Velkar scouting fleet without a trace, 63 years earlier, was now preparing something far greater, far more advanced, and far more dangerous than anything a simple scouting mission could have discovered. Back within the council archive, Elder Scythia finally rose from her seat, the old Velkar report still glowing faintly on the terminal before her. She had spent nearly 3 hours studying every detail of the 63-year-old mystery, searching for any clue, any connection, any explanation for what might have truly happened to that lost scouting fleet. She found none. The mystery remained exactly as unsolved as it had been decades earlier, but one thing had changed. Scythia now understood with a growing sense of unease that Earth's silence, its lack of visible fleets, its lack of obvious defenses, its lack of anything resembling the massive war machines built by empires like the Vaskar, might not be a sign of weakness at all. It might be something else entirely, something the galaxy had never truly understood. She thought once more of Ambassador Voss's calm, steady voice as she stood alone before the entire council, surrounded by beings powerful enough to destroy her entire world, and yet showing no fear at all. By the time the sun rises over my home city tomorrow morning, every single one of those ships will be gone. Scythia reached for her personal communicator, hesitating only a moment before sending a private, urgent message to Speaker Dramos. Speaker Dramos, she wrote carefully, I believe we may have gravely misjudged the situation regarding Earth. I request an emergency session before the Vaskar fleets take any further action. There is something about that planet the Council does not yet understand. She sent the message and sat back slowly in her chair, staring at the old Velkar report still glowing faintly on the terminal before her. Somewhere above the quiet blue planet called Earth, 3 Vaskar war fleets remained in position, utterly unaware of the storm that was quietly gathering beneath them. The countdown continued. Dawn was still hours away, but deep beneath Earth's surface, every system had already begun to hum quietly to life, waiting patiently for the moment it would finally be needed. 2 hours had passed since Elder Scythia sent her urgent message to Speaker Dramos. She had received no reply. She sat alone in her private quarters, high in one of the council's residential towers, watching the slow rotation of stars through her window. Sleep would not come to her tonight, not with the old Velkar report still fresh in her mind, and not with the strange cold feeling that had settled deep in her chest ever since she left the archive. Finally, her communicator chimed. A message from Dramos. Elder Scythia, it read, I have reviewed your concerns. While I respect your experience, I do not believe an unsolved mystery from 63 years ago is sufficient reason to call an emergency session. The Vaskar situation is a matter of territorial dispute, nothing more. Earth's ambassador made a bold statement out of desperation. It changes nothing. I suggest you rest. We will discuss this further if circumstances change. Cynthia read the message twice, her thin fingers tightening slightly around the communicator. Dramos was not a fool. He was simply a being who had spent 4,000 years watching weaker species make desperate threats before ultimately submitting or being destroyed. To him, humanity was just another entry in a very long, very familiar pattern. But Cynthia had learned across her impossibly long life that patterns sometimes broke. And when they did, it was almost always the beings who trusted the pattern most who suffered the greatest surprise. She set the communicator down and turned back to her window, watching the distant lights of passing starships, wondering how many hours remained until dawn touched that small blue planet on the edge of known space. Near the outer edge of Earth's solar system, aboard the command ship of the first Vaskar fleet, Commander Threx stood at his post, watching the sensor readings scroll steadily across his console. It was the deep, quiet hours of the ship's cycle, when most of the crew rotated to rest shifts, leaving only a skeleton crew to monitor the fleet's systems. Everything remained exactly as it had for the past several hours. Earth continued its slow rotation in the distance, its scattered city lights the only visible sign of the species living upon its surface. No unusual activity, no defensive maneuvers, no signs of the impossible promise the human ambassador had made back at the council, and yet Threx found himself unable to relax. Sensor readings? He asked the officer stationed nearby, more out of habit than genuine concern. Unchanged, Commander, the officer replied. Planetary communications remain at normal levels. No military buildup detected, no unusual energy signatures. Threx nodded slowly, but something continued to nag at the edge of his thoughts. No unusual energy signatures. That phrase in itself was strange. The Vaskar Empire had encountered dozens of primitive worlds across their long history of conquest, and almost all of them showed at least some faint traces of unusual energy. Leftover radiation from early nuclear experiments, stray signals from communication satellites, the natural chaos of a young civilization learning to use technology. Earth showed almost none of that. Its energy signature was unusually clean, unusually quiet, almost as if something was being deliberately hidden beneath the surface. Threx dismissed the thought quickly. He was simply tired, letting a foolish threat from a desperate diplomat affect his judgment. Earth was primitive. Earth was weak. Nothing about tonight would change that simple, obvious fact. He turned his attention back to routine monitoring duties, unaware that far below on the planet's surface, the very thing his sensors had failed to detect was already fully active, hidden beneath layers of technology specifically designed to remain invisible to exactly the kind of scanning systems the Vaskar fleet relied upon. Deep within Foundation Command, General Chen stood before the massive central display, watching real-time data stream in from dozens of sources scattered across the solar system. Small, nearly invisible sensor drones, deployed years earlier during quiet, unofficial space missions, continued to feed detailed information about the Vaskar fleet's exact positions, formations, and communication patterns. Fleet 1 remains stationed at coordinates 724, an operator reported. Fleet 2 and Fleet 3 holding formation nearby. No changes in the last hour. Good, Chen said. Let them stay comfortable. Beside him, Dr. Osei studied a separate screen, one displaying complex diagrams of Earth's hidden defense network, a system that had taken nearly 30 years to fully develop, built in complete secrecy across dozens of countries, funded through channels most governments themselves barely understood existed. The system had a name known only to the small circle involved in its creation, Project Threshold. Threshold status? Chen asked. All nodes fully charged and synchronized, Osei confirmed. Every calculation has been triple-checked. The moment those fleets cross the threshold line, the system will respond exactly as designed. Chen studied the diagram carefully. Project Threshold was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It fired no missiles, launched no ships, and required no massive war fleet of its own. Instead, it relied on something far more advanced, technology that manipulated the very fabric of space itself, developed initially from strange, unexplainable data, recovered decades earlier from an unusual crash site deep in a remote ocean trench, long before humanity had any real understanding of alien life. That crash site, and the impossible technology recovered from it, had become the foundation of everything Foundation Command had since developed. It explained how a species with no history of interstellar travel had managed to build defenses capable of matching, and potentially exceeding, the technology of empires who had ruled the stars for thousands of years. It also explained, though only a handful of people alive today truly understood the connection, exactly what had happened to 5 small Velkar scout ships that had wandered too close to Earth 63 years ago. Ambassador Voss has landed safely, an operator reported from across the room. She's being escorted directly to Foundation Command as instructed. Good, Chen said. She'll want to see this happen with her own eyes. Aboard the 2nd Vaskar fleet, stationed slightly farther from Earth than Threx's command, a different officer paced anxiously across the bridge of her ship. Her name was Commander Issa, a battle-hardened veteran who had served the Vaskar Empire for nearly 2 centuries, participating in the conquest of no fewer than 6 different worlds throughout her long military career. Unlike the younger, more confident Threx, Issa had learned through hard experience never to fully trust a quiet battlefield. Anything from long-range scans? She asked her sensor officer for what felt like the 100th time that night. Nothing unusual, Commander. The officer replied, clearly growing tired of repeating the same answer. The planet remains exactly as it has for the past several hours. Issa frowned, staring out at the distant blue world through the ship's main viewport. Something about tonight felt wrong to her, though she couldn't quite explain why. She had heard the recording of the council session, listened carefully to the human ambassador's calm, unshaken voice as she made her impossible promise. Most of her fellow officers dismissed the woman's words as an empty, desperate bluff. Issa was not so certain. In her 2 centuries of military service, she had encountered exactly one other type of enemy who spoke with that same calm, unshaken confidence in the face of overwhelming odds, and in every single case, that enemy had turned out to be far more dangerous than anyone initially believed. Increase sensor sensitivity, Issa ordered. I want continuous deep scans of the planet's surface, not just standard monitoring. Commander, that will use significantly more power, and Warlord Kroom specifically ordered standard monitoring protocols only. To conserve, I don't care what the Warlord ordered, Issa snapped. Something about this feels wrong. I want eyes on everything happening down there, and I want it now. The sensor officer hesitated only a moment before complying, adjusting the ship's scanning systems to their maximum sensitivity. For nearly 20 minutes, the deep scans revealed nothing unusual, the same quiet, primitive planet the fleet had been observing for hours. Then, suddenly a single alert flashed briefly across the sensor display, so brief that the officer almost missed it entirely. Commander, the officer said slowly, I'm detecting something strange, a brief energy fluctuation, originating from beneath the planet's surface. It's already gone, but for a moment, the reading was unlike anything in our database. Issa's eyes narrowed. Location? Difficult to pinpoint exactly, but the general region correlates with one of the planet's larger land masses. The signal vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Issa stared at the quiet blue planet for a long moment, that same cold, uneasy feeling growing stronger in her chest. Send a report to Commander Threx and to Warlord Kroom immediately, she said. Tell them exactly what we detected, and keep those deep scans running continuously. I don't care how much power it costs us. Back within Foundation Command, an alert quietly flashed across one of the secondary monitoring screens. General Chen, an operator called out. Fleet 2 just performed a brief deep scan sweep at maximum sensitivity. They caught a partial reading from threshold node 7 before our masking systems fully compensated. Chen's expression remained calm, though he exchanged a brief glance with Dr. Osei. How much did they see? He asked. Less than half a second of raw data, the operator replied. Not enough to identify the source clearly, but enough to know something is there. They're getting nervous, Osei said quietly. Good instincts, whoever gave that order. Most commanders wouldn't have bothered increasing sensitivity against a target they already believe is helpless. Doesn't matter, Chen said. Even a full clear reading wouldn't tell them what they're truly looking at. Not until it's already too late to matter. He turned back to the main display, watching the calm, steady status lights of Project Threshold's fully synchronized network. glowing softly across dozens of hidden locations around the planet. Time until optimal activation window? Chen asked. 4 hours and 12 minutes, General, Ose replied. Right around local sunrise, exactly as planned. Chen allowed himself a small, quiet breath, the first sign of tension he had shown all night. Let them stay nervous, he said finally. Nervous enemies make careless mistakes, and right now mistakes are exactly what we need them to make. Aboard the third and final Vaskar fleet, Warlord Kroom himself stood at the center of his massive command bridge. Having just received Commander Issa's urgent report regarding the strange energy fluctuation detected beneath Earth's surface. He read the report twice, his glowing orange eyes narrowing with something between irritation and curiosity. A single half-second energy spike, he muttered to himself, and Commander Issa believes this warrants increased alert status. Beside him, his second-in-command, a broad-shouldered Vaskar officer named Draxus, studied the same report with a slightly more cautious expression. Warlord, Draxus said carefully, given the ambassador's specific promise, perhaps a brief increase in fleet readiness would be. The ambassador's promise was the desperate bluff of a species that knows it cannot defend itself. Kroom interrupted sharply. I have conquered 6 worlds across my 3 centuries of service. I have heard countless desperate threats from countless desperate species standing exactly where that human woman stood tonight. Every single one of them ultimately proved as hollow as their empty promises. Of course. Warlord, Draxus said, though his expression remained uneasy. Kroom turned back toward the main viewport, staring down at the quiet blue planet in the distance, its scattered city lights glowing softly against the darkness of space. Send word to all 3 fleets, he said finally. Standard monitoring protocols only. Conserve power. We move against the planet's surface exactly as scheduled. Regardless of Commander Issa's nervous imagination. Yes, Warlord, Draxus replied, though he could not fully shake the same uneasy feeling that had settled over Commander Issa's ship hours earlier. Kroom remained standing at the viewport long after Draxus left to relay the order, his glowing eyes fixed on the distant quiet planet below. By the time the sun rises over my home city tomorrow morning, every single one of those ships will be gone. The human ambassador's words echoed once more through his mind, and despite 3 centuries of confidence built across 6 successful conquests, Warlord Kroom found himself, for just a brief moment, questioning exactly what kind of enemy he was truly facing. He dismissed the thought quickly, turning away from the viewport with a low, dismissive growl. Earth was primitive. Earth was weak. Nothing about a single brief energy spike would change that simple truth. Far below, hidden beneath layers of rock and 30 years of careful secrecy, Project Threshold continued its silent countdown, patiently waiting for the precise moment it had been designed for. Dawn was now less than 4 hours away. Ambassador Elena Voss stepped out of the transport shuttle and into the cold, quiet air of Foundation Command's main landing bay. She had traveled a long way since leaving the council chamber, first back to Earth, then down through 3 separate security checkpoints, each one hidden deeper beneath the mountain than the last. General Chen was waiting for her at the entrance, along with Dr. Ose. Ambassador, Chen said, extending a hand. Good timing. You'll want to see this. Elena shook his hand firmly. How long until activation? 3 hours and 40 minutes, Ose said, checking her tablet. Right on schedule. They walked together through the long corridor leading toward the central command room, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. Elena had visited Foundation Command only a handful of times over the years, always under the tightest secrecy, always as part of the small circle trusted with humanity's greatest secret. How did the council take it? Chen asked as they walked. Exactly as we expected, Elena said. They laughed. Kroom mocked us openly. Dramos warned me to reconsider my statement for Earth's own safety. And Elder Scythia? Elena paused slightly. She didn't laugh. She was the only one. Chen nodded slowly. Interesting. Osi picked up a council message trace a few hours ago, an old archive record request. Someone was digging into the Velkar incident. That would be her, Elena said. She's the only one on the council old enough to remember it happened. They reached the central command room, where dozens of operators sat at their stations, monitoring the steady flow of data streaming in from across the solar system. The massive main display at the front of the room showed a detailed live map. Earth at the center, and the three Vaskar fleets positioned at the outer edge of the system, exactly where they had remained for hours. "Show her the network," Chen said to Osei. Osei tapped a few commands into her tablet, and the display shifted, revealing a second layer beneath the fleet positions. Dozens of small, glowing markers scattered strategically across Earth's surface, its moon, and several key points throughout the inner solar system. Project Threshold, Osei explained. 63 individual nodes, each one calibrated to work together as a single unified system. Every node has been fully charged and synchronized for the past 6 hours. Elena studied the display carefully. She had been briefed on the general concept behind Project Threshold years earlier, but she had never actually seen the full network laid out like this, glowing softly across the solar system like a spider's web, waiting patiently for its prey to move. "Explain it to me again," she said. "In simple terms, I want to understand exactly what happens when this activates." Chen gestured toward the display. "Every node projects a localized field, invisible to standard sensors, capable of manipulating space at an extremely small scale. On its own, a single node does almost nothing, barely a measurable distortion. But when all 63 nodes activate together, synchronized perfectly, they create something far more significant. A trap," Osei said simply. "Any ship caught within the network's activation radius experiences a sudden, severe disruption to its own systems. Engines, weapons, shields, communications, all of it fails simultaneously. Not destroyed, not damaged in any way we could be blamed for starting a war over. Simply is disabled, completely and instantly." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "All 240 ships at once?" "All 240 ships at once," Chen confirmed. "The moment they're all confirmed within the network's boundary. And right now, Osei said, all 3 fleets are holding position just outside the outer edge of our activation radius. Close enough to threaten us, not quite close enough to be caught. So we need them to come closer," Elena said. "Exactly," Chen said. "And based on Kroom's own timeline, that's precisely what's about to happen." Aboard Warlord Kroom's command ship, the final hours before dawn passed slowly, tension building steadily among the fleet's officers despite Kroom's continued insistence that nothing unusual was occurring. "Commander," Issa's earlier warning had spread quietly through the fleet's command staff, and though Kroom publicly dismissed it as nervous imagination, privately, several officers had begun watching their own sensor readings far more closely than usual. "Warlord," Draxus said, approaching Kroom's command chair. "The deadline given to Earth expires in 3 hours. Shall I prepare the fleets to begin their approach?" Kroom nodded slowly. "Move all 3 fleets to bombardment range. We begin with their smaller coastal cities, exactly as promised. A demonstration, nothing more, to remind humanity of its place." "Yes, Warlord." Draxus relayed the order, and slowly across all 3 fleets, engines began to hum to life as 240 warships shifted from their holding positions and began their approach toward Earth. Aboard the second fleet, Commander Issa watched the movement order with a deepening sense of unease. Something about tonight still felt wrong to her, despite Kroom's continued confidence. "Continue deep scans," she ordered her sensor officer. "I want continuous monitoring throughout our approach, regardless of what standard protocol says." "Yes, Commander." The fleets moved steadily closer to Earth, crossing through empty space that had, until this moment, remained just outside the boundary of Foundation Command's hidden network. Back within the central command room, an alert quietly flashed across the main display. "General," an operator called out, "all 3 fleets are moving. Confirmed bombardment approach vector, heading directly toward Earth's orbit." Chen's expression sharpened. "Time until they cross the activation boundary?" The operator studied the data quickly. "At their current speed, approximately 11 minutes, General." "Osei?" "Threshold network remains fully synchronized," Osei confirmed. "Ready for immediate activation the moment all 240 ships are confirmed within the boundary." Elena stood quietly beside Chen, watching the glowing markers on the main display representing the Vaskar fleets. Slowly, steadily moving closer to the invisible trap, waiting patiently beneath them. "What happens to the crews?" she asked quietly. "After activation?" "They live," Chen said. "Every system fails, but life support remains completely unaffected. We're not trying to kill 240 ships full of soldiers who were simply following orders. We're trying to remove the threat permanently and decisively, without giving the Vaskar Empire or anyone else watching any legitimate justification to call this an act of war. A trap that disables without destroying, Elena said softly. Clever. It has to be, Osei said. If we destroy their fleet outright, we look like the aggressor, no matter what threats they made first. But if their own ships simply fail, all at once in a way they can't fully explain or prove was caused by us, we remove the threat while keeping the moral high ground completely intact. Elena nodded slowly, understanding now exactly why Foundation Command had spent 30 years developing this specific solution instead of something more directly aggressive. The main display continued tracking the fleet's steady approach. 9 minutes. Remaining aboard Commander Issa's ship, the sensor officer suddenly called out sharply, Commander, I'm picking up something again. The same energy signature from earlier, but stronger this time. And it's not just from one location anymore. Issa moved quickly to the sensor station, studying the readings herself. Across the display, dozens of small energy spikes had begun appearing simultaneously, scattered across Earth's surface, its moon, and several other points throughout the inner solar system. That's not one signal, Issa said slowly, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. That's dozens of signals, all activating at once. Commander, should I alert the warlord? Yes, immediately, Issa said. Tell him to halt the fleet's approach right now. Before, she never finished the sentence. 7 minutes remaining. According to Foundation Command's main display, when the last of the 240 Vaskar warships finally crossed the outer boundary of Project Threshold's activation radius. All fleets confirmed within boundary, the operator reported, his voice tight with focused tension. Chen turned to Osei. Activate. Osei's fingers moved quickly across her tablet, entering the final activation sequence into the system. Across the solar system, 63 hidden nodes, scattered carefully across Earth, its moon, and several strategic points in nearby space, activated simultaneously, their combined energy fields merging into a single, massive invisible network. For one brief, silent moment, nothing appeared to happen at all. Then, aboard all 240 Vaskar warships, every single system failed at exactly the same instant. Aboard Warlord Kroom's command ship, the bridge plunged into sudden, jarring darkness as the main lights flickered and died. Emergency backup systems activated automatically a moment later, casting the bridge in dim red light. Report, Kroom bellowed, rising from his command chair. Warlord, we've lost engine power completely, one officer called out, his hands moving frantically across a dead console. Weapon systems offline. Shields offline. I'm reading complete system failure across every communications. Kroom demanded. Dead, Warlord. We can't reach any other ship in the fleet. Kroom moved quickly to the main viewport, staring out at the rest of his fleet. Every ship, as far as he could see, drifted silently in space, their engines dark, their weapons powerless, their shields completely gone. 240 of the most powerful warships in the Vaskar Empire, utterly helpless, drifting silently above a planet they had believed completely defenseless only moments earlier. What did they do? Draxus whispered, staring out at the same impossible sight. Kroom said nothing at first, his glowing orange eyes fixed on the quiet blue planet below, the same planet he had promised to bombard within the hour. The same planet a small, calm human ambassador had stood before an entire council and promised would destroy his fleet by dawn. By the time the sun rises over my home city tomorrow morning, every single one of those ships will be gone. For the first time in 3 centuries of military service, Warlord Kroom felt something he had not felt in longer than he could remember. Fear. Aboard one of the smaller escort ships near the edge of the disabled fleet, a young Vaskar technician managed to restore a single, weak emergency communication channel, just barely powerful enough to send a short, broken transmission before the system failed completely once again. The message, sent blindly out into space, carried only a few desperate words before the signal died entirely. It's not a weapon. It's a trap we built ourselves. We walked right into it. The transmission ended abruptly, swallowed once more by silence. Back within Foundation Command, the central command room erupted into quiet, controlled celebration as confirmation reports streamed in across the main display. All 240 ships confirmed disabled, the operator reported. 0 casualties detected. 0 weapons fired from our side. Complete system failure across the entire enemy fleet. Chen allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Exactly as planned. Ose let out a long, relieved breath. 30 years of work, and it worked perfectly on the very first activation. Elena remained quiet, staring at the main display, watching the 240 small, dark markers now drifting helplessly above Earth, exactly where, only hours earlier, Warlord Kroom had confidently promised to begin the bombardment of humanity's cities. They still don't know how, she said quietly. No, Chen agreed, and they won't, not tonight. Maybe not ever. Outside, far above the quiet, undisturbed cities of Earth, the first faint light of dawn had just begun to touch the horizon, exactly as Ambassador Elena Voss had promised. Before the sun fully rose over her home city, every single one of Warlord Kroom's 240 warships had been completely, silently and permanently erased as any kind of threat. The trap had sprung, and the galaxy had no idea what had truly just happened. Silence filled the bridge of Warlord Kroom's command ship. Not the tense waiting silence of the hours before, but something heavier, something closer to shock. Dim red emergency lights cast long shadows across the faces of officers who, only minutes earlier, had stood confident and relaxed, certain of an easy victory over a helpless, primitive world. Kroom stood at the viewport staring out at his fleet, unmoving. 240 warships, once the pride of the Vaskar Empire, now drifted silently in the darkness like toys abandoned by a careless child. No lights, no engines, no weapons, just cold dead metal hanging motionless above a planet they had come to conquer. Warlord, Draxus said carefully, breaking the silence. Life support remains functional across all ships. We are alive, but nothing else responds. No engines, no weapons, no shields, no long-range communication. I can see that, Kroom said quietly, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. Draxus hesitated before continuing. Should we attempt manual repairs? Attempt them, Kroom said. Though I suspect you already know what you will find. Draxus did know. Every engineer aboard every disabled ship across the fleet would soon discover the same impossible truth. Nothing appeared physically damaged. No burned circuits. No broken components. No sign of any weapon having struck the ships at all. Every system simply refused to respond, as though some invisible hand had reached into the very heart of their technology and gently, silently turned it off. Aboard Commander Issa's ship, the situation was identical. Her engineering officer, a steady, experienced Vaskar named Ferric, worked frantically at the main engine core, running diagnostic after diagnostic, each one returning the exact same confusing result. I don't understand this. Commander, Ferric said, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold air filling the powerless ship. Every component tests as fully functional. The engine should work. The weapons should work. But nothing responds when we try to activate any of it. As if the systems themselves have forgotten how to function, Issa said quietly, staring at the diagnostic readout. That's not possible, Commander. And yet here we are, Issa replied. She turned away from the diagnostic station and moved toward the ship's main viewport, staring silently at the quiet blue planet below, the same planet her fleet had approached only minutes earlier with total confidence, prepared to begin a bombardment that would demonstrate Vaskar superiority once and for all. Now, instead, her ship drifted helplessly above that same planet, completely at its mercy. She warned us, Issa thought. Remembering the strange energy readings she had detected hours earlier, remembering her own growing unease that Kroom had so easily dismissed. The human ambassador warned us exactly what would happen, and none of us believed her. Back within Foundation Command, the atmosphere in the central command room had shifted from tense focus to quiet, controlled celebration. Operators exchanged relieved glances across their stations, though the professional discipline of the room kept any loud celebration from breaking out just yet. Confirm status of all 240 vessels, Chen said. His voice calm despite the significance of the moment. Confirmed disabled, General, an operator reported. 0 movement detected across the entire fleet. Life support remains stable on all ships. No injuries or casualties reported from our monitoring systems. And their attempts at repair? Multiple ships have already begun diagnostic attempts, the operator continued. So far, 0 success. Threshold's disruption field appears to be holding perfectly. Osei studied her tablet closely, watching the steady stream of technical data confirming the network's continued success. The field will hold as long as we need it to, she said. Every node remains fully charged, and the network requires only minimal power to maintain the disruption once initial activation succeeds. Elena stepped closer to the main display, studying the 240 small, dark markers still drifting motionless above Earth. What happens now? She asked. Do we simply leave them there? Chen considered the question carefully. That's ultimately a decision for our government leaders, not for us directly. But my recommendation, and I believe the recommendation of most of the planning committee, is that we allow the fleet to remain disabled for a set period, long enough to make our point absolutely clear, before gradually restoring limited functionality, enough for them to safely retreat, but not enough to pose any further threat. A message, Elena said. Exactly, Chen said. We could have destroyed them outright. 240 ships completely helpless, completely at our mercy. We chose not to. That choice matters, both to the wider galaxy watching how this unfolds, and to Earth's own future reputation. Elena nodded slowly, understanding the careful calculation behind every decision Foundation Command had made throughout the night. This was never simply about defending Earth from a single threat. It was about establishing, clearly and permanently, exactly how humanity intended to be treated by the wider galaxy from this moment forward. Aboard Kroom's command ship, nearly an hour after the initial system failure, Draxus returned to the bridge with a grim report. Warlord, I've received updates from engineering teams across all 3 fleets. The results are consistent everywhere. No physical damage detected on any ship. No sign of any weapon impact, energy discharge, or hostile action of any kind. Every system simply stopped functioning simultaneously across all 240 vessels. An impossible feat, Kroom muttered, still staring silently out at his helpless fleet. Warlord, Draxus continued carefully. There is something else. Commander Issa reports that her sensor officer detected multiple energy signatures originating from the planet's surface, its moon, and several other locations throughout the system, all activating simultaneously, just before our systems failed. Kroom turned slowly to face Draxus. Multiple locations working together? That appears to be the case, Warlord. Kroom's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information now available to him. Not a single massive weapon, but something far more sophisticated. A coordinated network, spread carefully across the entire solar system, activated at precisely the right moment to disable his entire fleet without firing a single shot. The human ambassadors. Words echoed once more through his thought. Strength takes many forms. He had dismissed those words as empty philosophy from a desperate diplomat. Now, staring out at the wreckage of his own overwhelming confidence, he began to understand exactly what she had truly meant. Hours passed slowly aboard the disabled Vaskar fleet, the crews growing increasingly restless as repair attempts continued to fail one after another. No engines, no weapons, no communication beyond the fleet's own limited internal channels. Then, gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, something began to change. Aboard Kroom's ship, a low hum returned to the engine core, faint and unsteady at first, then growing gradually stronger. Warlord, an engineering officer called out excitedly. Engine power is returning. Slowly, but it's returning. Kroom moved quickly to check the readings himself. Sure enough, basic engine function had begun to restore itself across his ship, though weapon systems and shields remained completely offline. Fleet-wide status, Kroom ordered. Reports began streaming in from across all 3 fleets, confirming the same pattern everywhere. Basic engine function returning slowly, life support remaining stable throughout, weapons and shields remaining completely disabled. They're letting us leave, Draxus said quietly, understanding dawning slowly across his face. They disabled us completely, held us helpless for hours, and now they're restoring just enough function for us to retreat, but nothing that could allow us to fight back. Kroom said nothing for a long moment, staring at the readings before him, understanding fully now the precise, calculated nature of what had been done to his fleet. This had never been a battle. It had been a demonstration, a controlled, deliberate show of overwhelming capability, executed with such precision that not a single life had been lost, not a single ship destroyed, and yet every ounce of Vaskar military threat had been completely, permanently neutralized. "Warlord," Draxus said carefully. "Your orders?" Kroom closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the situation settling fully upon him. 3 centuries of military service, 6 successful conquests, and now the single greatest humiliation of his entire career, delivered not through overwhelming force but through quiet, patient, absolute precision by a species he had dismissed as primitive and helpless only hours earlier. "Order all 3 fleets to retreat," Kroom said finally, his voice heavy with barely controlled anger. "We return to Vaskar territory immediately." "And Earth?" Kroom turned back toward the viewport one final time, staring down at the quiet blue planet below, now fully bathed in the soft golden light of a rising sun. "Earth," he said slowly, "will report this to the Council itself." Aboard the human transport shuttle carrying Ambassador Elena Voss back toward the surface, Elena watched through the small viewport as the first rays of sunlight spread slowly across the horizon, illuminating the quiet cities of Earth below, entirely unaware of just how close they had come to devastating attack during the night, and entirely unaware of just how completely that threat had now been removed. Her communicator chimed softly. "A message from General Chen. Confirmed retreat vector detected across all 3 Vaskar fleets. They're leaving, Ambassador." Exactly as promised. Before dawn, Elena allowed herself a small, quiet smile, watching the sunrise spread gently across the world she had sworn, before an entire council of powerful ancient species, to protect. "By the time the sun rises over my home city tomorrow morning, every single one of those ships will be gone." The promise had been kept. Far above, as the last of the Vaskar warships began their slow, humiliating retreat from Earth's solar system, a single automated distress beacon, launched hours earlier from Commander Issa's disabled ship, finally reached the outer edge of Council-monitored space, carrying with it a short, urgent report destined for the Galactic Council itself. The mockery was over. Dawn had come, exactly as promised, and the galaxy was about to learn, in full, undeniable detail, precisely what humanity was truly capable of. The distress beacon from Commander Issa's disabled ship reached Council-monitored space just as the first Council members were arriving for the morning session. It carried a short, urgent message, hastily recorded during the darkest hour of the crisis, when the Vaskar fleet still believed itself completely helpless. By the time Speaker Dramos entered the Grand Chamber, the message had already spread through the Council's communication network, passed quietly from delegate to delegate, whispered in hallways, discussed in private meeting rooms. By the time the formal session began, nearly every member of the Council had already heard some version of what happened above Earth during the night. Dramos took his seat at the head of the chamber, his golden eyes scanning the room. The mood was different this morning. The easy laughter, the casual dismissiveness that had filled the chamber only one day earlier, was gone, replaced by something far more uncertain. "This session is called to order," Dramos said, his voice carrying its usual calm authority, though something beneath it had shifted. "We have received an urgent report from the Vaskar Empire regarding an incident near the human system. I will allow Warlord Kroom to present his account directly." A side door opened and Warlord Kroom entered the chamber, his massive frame moving with none of the confident swagger he had displayed the day before. His red skin looked duller than usual, his glowing orange eyes dimmed with something that looked almost like exhaustion. He walked to the platform slowly, deliberately, clearly choosing his words carefully before he spoke. "Council members," he began, "at approximately 0300 hours, standard time, all 3 fleets of the Vaskar War Armada, stationed near the human system, experienced a complete and simultaneous system failure. 240 warships, disabled without warning, without any detectable weapon discharge, and without any physical damage to any vessel." Murmurs spread through the chamber, delegates leaning toward each other, whispering rapidly. "For nearly 6 hours," Kroom continued, "my fleets remained completely helpless above the human planet, unable to move, unable to communicate beyond short-range channels, unable to defend ourselves in any way. During this entire period, The human species chose not to destroy a single ship, not to harm a single member of my crew. When our systems gradually began to restore themselves, it became clear that only basic functions had been returned, enough to allow retreat, but nothing that could be used for any hostile action. Speaker Dramos leaned forward slightly. Are you certain this was an intentional act by Earth and not some natural phenomenon or unrelated malfunction? I am certain, Kroom said. Commander Issa's sensor readings, recorded moments before the failure, detected multiple coordinated energy signatures originating from the planet's surface, its moon, and several other points throughout the system, all activating in perfect synchronization. This was not chance. This was deliberate, precise, and controlled. The chamber fell into a heavy, uncertain silence. Finally, from her seat near the back of the room, Elder Scythia rose slowly to her feet. Speaker Dramos, she said, her ancient voice carrying clearly across the quiet chamber. Yesterday, I requested an emergency session regarding a matter I believed relevant to this exact situation. You declined my request. I would ask now, with full respect, that the Council reconsider the information I attempted to raise. Dramos studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Proceed, Elder Scythia. Scythia gestured, and the old Velkar report she had studied the night before appeared projected in the air above the chamber floor, its faded text and images visible to every delegate present. 63 years ago, Scythia began, before humanity had developed any form of space travel, a small Velkar scouting fleet entered the same solar system currently in question. 5 ships, sent to survey an unremarkable blue planet showing early signs of complex life. Their final transmission described unusual energy readings unlike anything in their database. Then, without warning, all 5 ships vanished completely. No wreckage, no debris, no distress signal, nothing. She paused, letting the information settle across the silent chamber. At the time, this incident was dismissed as an unfortunate accident, filed away and largely forgotten. But given what Warlord Kroom has just described, a coordinated, precise, and entirely non-destructive method of disabling advanced technology, I believe we must now seriously consider the possibility that humanity, or whatever unknown power resides upon that planet, has possessed this capability for far longer than any of us previously understood. The chamber erupted into low, urgent murmuring, dozens of delegates speaking rapidly among themselves, the easy confidence of the day before now replaced entirely by genuine uncertainty. Dramos raised a hand, calling for silence. Ambassador Voss, he said, turning his attention to Elena, who stood quietly at her own platform, having listened to the entire exchange without interruption. Would you care to address the Council regarding this matter? Elena stepped forward, her expression as calm and composed as it had been the day before, though now, for the first time, the entire chamber watched her with something closer to genuine attention rather than dismissive amusement. Yesterday, she said, this council laughed when I promised that Earth would remove the threat posed by 240 Vaskar warships by dawn. Warlord Kroom suggested I intended to throw rocks at his ships from our planet's surface. Speaker Dramos advised me to reconsider my statement for Earth's own safety. She paused, letting her words settle across the silent chamber. I understand why you doubted us. You have watched humanity for only 2 years. You have seen our simple ships, our early technology, our young and developing civilization, and you concluded reasonably enough based on what you could observe that we were weak. But I would remind this council of something I said yesterday, something that seemed to amuse many of you at the time. Strength takes many forms. What form of strength allowed you to disable an entire war fleet without a single weapon discharge? A delegate called out from somewhere in the chamber, unable to contain the question any longer. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. Earth does not intend to reveal the full details of our defensive capabilities to this council, or to any other party at this time. What I can say is this: humanity spent decades preparing quietly, patiently for exactly this kind of moment, precisely because we understood that our peaceful appearance would eventually be tested by someone who believed peace meant weakness. And the Velkar incident? Scythia asked directly. 63 years ago, before your species had any known contact with intelligent life beyond your own world? Elena met the ancient elder's gaze steadily. I cannot speak to matters from before my own government fully understood the situation Earth found itself in. What I can say is that Earth has always defended itself, even during periods when the rest of the galaxy assumed we were incapable of doing so. The chamber remained silent, absorbing the full weight of her carefully chosen words. Warlord Kroom, still standing at his own platform, finally spoke again, his voice quieter now than it had been the day before. Ambassador Voss, he said, yesterday I threatened to burn your cities until your species understood its place. I offer no apology for pursuing what I believed to be Vaskar interests, but I will acknowledge before this entire council that I misjudged the situation entirely. Earth is not the helpless world I believed it to be. No, Elena said simply. It is not. Dramos studied the exchange carefully, his ancient mind working through the full implications of everything he had just witnessed. 4,000 years of council leadership had taught him to recognize genuine power when he finally saw it clearly, regardless of how it had first appeared. Ambassador Voss, he said finally, on behalf of this council, I extend a formal apology for the manner in which Earth's concerns were dismissed during yesterday's session. It is clear now that we gravely misjudged your species' true capabilities. Elena inclined her head slightly. Apology accepted, Speaker Dramos. Earth has never sought conflict with this council, or with any of its member species. We came here yesterday asking for peace, and that request remains unchanged today. We do not wish to be feared. We simply wish to no longer be underestimated. A quiet murmur of agreement spread through the chamber. Delegates who only a day earlier had laughed openly at Earth's ambassador now watching her with a mixture of respect and cautious uncertainty. Warlord Kroom bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect Elena suspected he had rarely offered to anyone during his 3 centuries of military service. The Vaskar Empire withdraws all claims and demands regarding Earth's resources, he said formally. We will not return. Thank you, Warlord, Elena said. Dramos rose from his seat, addressing the full chamber one final time. Let it be recorded, from this day forward, that Earth's status within this council shall reflect its true capabilities, rather than assumptions based on incomplete information. This session is concluded. As the chamber slowly began to empty, delegates filing out in quiet, thoughtful conversation, Elder Scythia approached Elena's platform, her ancient eyes studying the human ambassador with open curiosity. You never fully answered my question, Ambassador, Scythia said quietly once most of the other delegates had left. About the Velkar incident. Elena offered a small, knowing smile. No, she said. I didn't. Scythia studied her a moment longer, understanding clearly that some questions would remain unanswered, at least for now. Your species is far more interesting than this council initially believed, she said finally. We tend to have that effect, Elena replied. Far beyond the edge of council-monitored space in a region of the galaxy few council members had ever fully explored, a message quietly arrived at the private communication terminal of a being whose identity remained unknown, even to Speaker Dramos himself. The message contained a brief, detailed summary of everything that had occurred above Earth during the previous night. The mockery at the council, the confident threats made by Warlord Kroom, and the complete silent disabling of 240 Vaskar warships without a single shot fired. The being who received this message had watched Earth carefully for a very long time, far longer than even Elder Scythia's ancient memory could recall, ever since the earliest reports of unusual anomalies near that quiet blue planet had first reached their attention decades earlier. They read the report twice, considering carefully everything it revealed and everything it still left unexplained. Finally, they composed a short reply, addressed not to the Galactic Council, but directly to a private channel reserved for their most trusted advisors. So, the message read, the old rumors were true after all. Earth is not what the galaxy believed it to be. Prepare a formal delegation, not a threat, not a demand, an offer of alliance, extended directly, before anyone else recognizes what we have already discovered. The message was sent quietly into the vast darkness of space, carrying with it the first quiet ripple of something far larger than a single conquered fleet or a single humbled empire. Word was beginning to spread, and far beyond the reach of the Galactic Council's laughter, powers far older and far more careful than Warlord Kroom's Vaskar Empire had begun to take notice of the small, quiet blue planet that had, in a single night, transformed itself from a subject of mockery into a name the entire galaxy would soon learn never to underestimate again. Dawn had come, and humanity had answered exactly as promised. The end.